We've had some great games everywhere this year, but let's take a look at the Microsoft side of the woods. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, the best Xbox One games of 2018. Number 10 is Dead Cells, and it should come as no surprise we've been talking about this game plenty recently. It's a roguelike that kind of plays out like a Metroidvania in some ways, but is actually pretty traditional in structure, if not for the fact that when you die, you go back to the beginning of the game, and everything regenerates itself. The game is separated into kind of levels, but you can't memorize those levels. There's no world map to memorize, and the game is smooth as hell. In a lot of ways, the game has been looked at as kind of a Souls-like, roguelike, Metroidvania-like platforming action game, and that's all pretty much right. It's such a layered, interesting experience that is just a 2D action game, and I love it. Number 9 is Monster Hunter World, which we've talked a lot about this year as well. At this point, the reason why you should play this game is that it manages to be sort of a culmination of pretty much everything that is Monster Hunter. It doesn't get too far from the formula, but it does bring in more Western-friendly elements that don't impede, but rather actually kind of enhance the formula. I really like Monster Hunter World, and it's obviously the best looking of all of them. And I also like that it's a full open world game instead of a zoned up game like the previous Monster Hunters. And Monster Hunter's just all around fun anyways. Number 8 is Sea of Thieves, a game that did get a lot of criticism, and I'm gonna go ahead and say I pretty much have to acknowledge that, because if we're gonna put that here, it's got to be acknowledged that this game doesn't have enough content, or didn't have enough content. I do think that if this game is supported over the course of a few years, it's really going to be good, but to talk about why it's in this list, Sea of Thieves is really just a great social pirate game. I don't think enough people have described it as that, and if you do describe it as that, if your expectations are a social pirate game, it's actually amazing. If you get some friends together and do some pirating, and you can either role play or just talk about your lives while you're doing it, I don't care. It's better than a video call for the most part. It's also very pretty, and although it can be a little repetitive, like I said, if they support it over a number of years, I think it's gonna actually be really amazing. Number 7 is Assassin's Creed Odyssey. As I've said a few times elsewhere, Assassin's Creed Odyssey benefits from being developed side by side with Origins. It retains all of the stuff that made Origins probably the best Assassin's Creed game, and although it's maybe a little bit less good than Origins, it's still way up there in quality. Now, we probably won't get an Assassin's Creed game next year, which is fine with me. They abandoned the yearly plan. The only reason this one came out a year after is because they developed it side by side. And I think really the reason this is such a great game is that it takes all the advancements from Origins and plops you in a beautiful, big new world that I think is among the best, if not the best, in the series. Number 6 is Far Cry 5, which is also among the best of the series. It's such a unique story to Far Cry. It sort of combines some of the scarier elements of American culture and history. A lot of people try to place it more recently, politically speaking, but I think it's much more historical. There's satirical elements that touch on a lot of like the last 50 years worth of sort of scarier American events. But even if you don't know the history, it's still a great game because the world is so well fleshed out. And to me, that's really what kept me coming back. Although the gameplay itself, it's Far Cry, it's not gonna like shock you or anything. That doesn't mean it's not a really well-refined gameplay system at this point. It absolutely is, but I think it shines because there's so much content to it. Number 5 is Black Ops 4. I've said it elsewhere as far as multiplayer goes. This is probably the best Call of Duty game. It really benefits from the fact that there is focus on the multiplayer. It does have a detriment in that there is not a single player campaign, and I actually like the Black Ops single player campaigns. I know people always say like COD campaigns are kind of simplistic and maybe not the best productions of all time. I don't know, I really liked Black Ops 3's campaign. I enjoyed it. Maybe it wasn't high art or anything, but I liked it. I hope that they, give us more single player in the future. But as far as multiplayer goes, Black Ops 4 is probably some of the slickest, nicest playing multiplayer in the series. It's not devoid of problems, it has problems, but pretty much every AAA game has problems now in the form of microtransactions. I mean, it kind of sucks that they snuck them in after people were playing the game for a little while, but you know, whatever. Still a great game. Number 4 is Hitman 2. I can't really talk about this game without mentioning the episodic game. When that was announced, a lot of people were really suspicious. And then it happened, and the episodes were all brilliant. They're really detailed, really well thought out, gave you a lot of freedom, and were a lot of fun, even if you didn't play them right and didn't accomplish what you were supposed to. Hitman 2 is more of that, except for bigger, better, and more humorous as well. Not as if the first was devoid of humor, but Hitman 2 really does a good job of integrating humor into the gameplay too. It's just a phenomenal game. I love Hitman 2. I love the new Hitman games. For a series that has had a bit of a storied past, hearing they're rebooting it again, it was a little nerve-wracking, but it's 2 games in now, and we're still this good. And if it's not maintaining, it's getting better, which is exactly what I want. Number 3 is Ashen, a Souls-like game which manages to take the deep, dark, existential dread of Dark Souls a bit out of the equation. Maybe not entirely, but it's a bit more social, a bit more friendly. There's people to talk to. There's kind of a nicer, prettier world, but that doesn't mean it's not an existential dread story. It is. There is a threat to everything in a very similar way to Dark Souls, as a matter of fact, but the art style and the world definitely make you feel a little bit better as you're attempting to stop it. It is a hard game. Is it as hard as Dark Souls? Probably not, but it's challenging, and it's a very good example of the kind of fighting that's present in those games. It's one of those games where I'm comfortable calling it in the top rung of games for Xbox One for the year, just because you feel the love put into this game immediately. It is just a passion project, and that's just something that makes me very happy whenever I see it. Number 2 is Forza Horizon 4. Out of the 2 Forza series, my preference is definitely Horizon. It's really just a beautiful game that has dynamic seasons, shows just a ton of jaw-dropping scenery all around Britain, and really just ends up putting together a shared world that works in such a seamless and enjoyable fashion. It's big. That's like the thing that you can describe this game as. Not just big for the sake of big though, but a really well-developed, deep experience that manages to be both deep and casual. I love it. I really enjoy it. And finally, number 1 is Red Dead Redemption 2, a game that fleshes out the Wild West in surprising detail, to say the least. There's so much to do in Red Dead Redemption 2 that some of it is maybe a bit too much. Not in a bad way, not in a way where I'm saying like it's a detriment to the game, but sometimes I do feel like, hey, maybe this could have been a little less realistic. But fortunately, none of the things that I felt kind of had the real world type of tedium really were a detriment in a way that I cared about. Red Dead Redemption 2 absorbs you. It feels like occupying a world, which is exactly what a title like Red Dead Redemption should be. Rockstar did just a phenomenal job with this game. It looks great on Xbox One, plays great on Xbox One, and there's no good reason not to play it. Few bonus games for you to check out. First is Nier Automata Become as Gods Edition, the sort of Game of the Year style version of Nier Automata, which is, in my opinion, kind of the game of the decade. Frankly, we could Game of the Year that one many years in a row. I wouldn't care. It takes so many different genres, competently combines them, and tells a narrative that is just totally unique. Truly an amazing title. Kingdom Come Deliverance, which, do not get me wrong, has its problem. This is a game that, well, launched pretty buggy. It's got a lot of arguments about it across the internet, but there is one thing it deserves some praise for, and that is its combat system. It is one of the most ambitious combat systems in a game, period. And it takes a lot of learning and nuance to get a hold on exactly what you're doing, but once you do, it is very satisfying. Next is Below, which is an action-adventure roguelike with minimalist, simplistic, but very pretty graphics. This is one of those games that uses atmosphere to its absolute advantage. It's a bit of a roguelite. It's not the most involved, but it is a pretty difficult game, and it really does a good job with the sort of Zelda-style gameplay without getting too far into ripping off their level design elements. Next is State of Decay 2, which builds on the community elements that sort of emerged from State of Decay 1. It does a phenomenal job of transferring what is, frankly, a sorely needed official recognition of a dynamic that some people chose to indulge. Next, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the conclusion to the reboot trilogy. Honestly, a slightly more controversial game than the previous two, but if I'm totally honest, I really liked it. Like, I will say it did maybe miss some opportunities to be a little more introspective, but it didn't miss all of them, and frankly, I don't know that I really expected it to hit them in the first place. There's a cognitive dissonance that comes with this game, Lara Croft being wary of murder and violence, well, that being a key mechanic, and it's, again, a game that handles it just fine. And also, it plays great. And finally, Celeste, which, frankly, we're never not going to mention. Celeste is a platform game that just does so much with a retro design that you just never would expect. They take the HUD out of the equation, make the hair into the dash gauge, and the level design is just brilliant. Phenomenal game. What was your favorite Xbox One game of 2018? Leave us a comment, let us know what you think, and if you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. The best way to subscribe, of course, to see our latest videos is a subscription, so click the subscribe button and don't forget to click the notification bell. As always, thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at FalconTheHero, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.